Hey everyone, welcome to the Modern Leadership Podcast. I'm Tim Nolan. So, in today's episode, we're going to look at this article I was just reading in Inc. magazine that was talking about quiet cracking. And it's hard to keep up with all these different terms and phrases that when we look at overall this really downturn in employee engagement. But this one had some really interesting features when looking at the quiet cracking. And so this article was discussing a recent survey and research from Talent LMS. And one of the things they found was that quiet cracking exists between burnout and quiet quitting. And it's really highlighted by employees who feel unappreciated by managers, who don't listen or notice them, and maybe they don't have a lot of career advancement opportunities. And the article also mentions how its quiet cracking is an erosion of workplace satisfaction from within. Now, I guess when you look at this, one of the biggest things to look at in life, I would feel, is that what we call an internal locus of control, meaning the individual sees where they go in life is determined by their efforts and their approaches to things. And I do think there's a personal accountability and responsibility that is missing from a lot of society, to be quite honest with you. And this is, we're seeing this in the workplace as well, unsurprisingly. And so, with that being said, this kind of goes to what does your onboarding process look like? And I have a future episode that we devote a lot more time to that. But, and again, these are one of the things that we focus on in the Highly Effective Managers Program. So again, there's a class is starting on the 24th of July. Got a couple seats left if that's something you want to jump in on, 12-month program. But I mostly work with organizations. So if your organization would like to learn more about that, definitely reach out to me, Tim at modernleadershippodcast.com or Tim at highlyeffectiveorganizations.org. And we can definitely discuss it more, show you a demo, send you a book, so forth and so on. But, back to this. And so it goes back to this really personal accountability. And if people are having an erosion of workplace satisfaction, then I think for me, the important thing to look at is where does the employee see themselves in this? Now, when you look at this research, you can probably get to the fact that maybe that they have tried certain things and they feel just really frustrated for not being seen, not being heard, not being asked, not having opportunities for learning and development. So, okay, that makes sense. But I do think people need to look at what's my role in this, looking at that personal accountability. How am I contributing to the outcome of situations that I'm involved in? And I think that's an underlying thing to look at as you're developing your team and looking at some of those expectations, that the expectations are not always performance expectations. The expectations of, professional deportment, how people conduct and carry themselves. So one of those is, yeah, we need people who can take accountability and ownership and then you need to delve into that. Not just say accountability and ownership and walk away, but really provide context, give examples, and model yourself. This is what accountability and ownership look like. And so come up with a few examples, talk about it, and then when people start demonstrating those things, you definitely want to reinforce it. And that's a good point, good opportunity for weekly recognition as well. And so when we look at the article and how they based it, it's a small sample size, 1,000 people, but it's telling because it said that 54% of people reported experiencing one or more aspects of quiet cracking. Again, feeling unappreciated, not having enough professional development opportunities, career advancement. And so the recommendations were improving learning and development for employees and managers asking for feedback. That was my last episode. I was talking about that. And recognizing the work and achievements of employees. So let's look at the learning and development aspect for staff. And this is something that creates an opportunity for you if you think about it. And depending on how large your organization is, you may have a training department, you may have a learning management system or database. And those things are often don't quite hit the mark for employees. And so that's why I think that what you should do is look at micro training opportunities on your team and then have them identify. You can do some occasional surveys with your team or check in, find out what are some training areas that you would like to see. And if you don't get a lot of participation, then you identify. But more importantly, you identify these topics, and then you want to empower your team to participate, to lead them. So this is not something that you're going to be doing. Is you want to have a different person on your team every month, maybe lead a 10 or 15-minute discussion, training, whatever it may be, whether it's based on a book, a YouTube video, something that's relevant to the work that you do. And this is something that can really create some good cohesion on your team as well. So I think that's one way to look at it, one of the recommendations. And then the other recommendation was, again, managers asking for feedback. This is something I spent a lot of time on in the last podcast episode, looking at survey, doing twice a year an anonymous 3-question survey with your staff. And this takes some professional maturity to do because you have to be able to handle the responses that you receive. In fact, I was talking about this with a group this week, and one of them said, yeah, I was part of an organization where they did surveys, and this one manager was trying to hunt down the person that gave them negative feedback. And when that happens, that erodes the trust of everyone. Like, that person's never going to be able to do a survey again with their team. And so as far as psychological safety, that's shot. But so knowing that is, you may get some unflattering information, but the most important thing to look at is, why are they saying it? Is it part of a theme? Am I hearing it from other people? And this relates to blind spots. Is we may feel we're doing a good job, when in some cases it's not as good as what we think it is. And this is highlighted by that research I was sharing in the last episode where, they asked a group of managers how they felt they were doing managing their team. And 97% of these managers in this group felt they were doing a really good job of managing their team. However, when Gallup turned around and was asking the employees how they felt their manager was doing, 69% of the employees who reported to the managers said that they had a bad boss. And so this highlights this discrepancy, highlights this potential blind spot. And the only way to minimize blind spots, or really the most important way, is by asking for feedback. And that takes risk. But this is risk for the employee, as well as it's putting you out there as well. However, and I've done this with some teams I've led, and sometimes you get some unflattering responses for sure, but it also opens a door for getting good development, getting good synergy, having some meaningful conversations, and most importantly, really enhancing employee commitment. That is, if you are a people leader, whether you manage one person or several divisions, or you manage a company, is you are looking for maximizing employee commitment. That is the driver. It's not engagement. Gallup talks about engagement, and it's a good metric to look at. And commitment's harder to measure, but commitment comes first. Commitment comes first. So that's a really big thing to look at, is what can you do to enhance commitment? And this is actually related to something that came up in a group yesterday. I had a phenomenal group. We did Leading with a Vision. It was a really awesome group. Great discussion, great insight, perspective. And one person was talking about how, today's workforce, there's not a lot of loyalty with people. And when we compare that to prior generations, where there was that loyalty, where they were going to stick it out, where they probably stuck it out too long, in fact, and that's why the pendulum has swung. But still, you have these people that saw themselves as like, I'm attaching to this place. This is my organization. I'm going to work here until I retire. Now, most people don't think of it like that anymore. However, I was running counter to this discussion because, again, it was really good. But I was like, I do think this is a big opportunity for people leaders and organizations to focus and be intentional on how to create loyalty. And you do that through commitment. And so commitment continues to be the driver. Commitment, kind of like what this article is discussing, is looking at ways to maximize the employee experience. And again, organizations that do best with retention and overall performance have a really strong focus on employee experience. And this is something to look at for your organization, or if you're just focusing on your team, is I want to check in with my employees. What is their experience here? How would they rate it? How could it be better? And how can I help with that? And then lastly, is there anything that we can work on jointly to make this happen? So the employee experience, but loyalty is something that starts, whether it's through recruitment, but really your first interaction with the individual, which is probably during the interview process. And so think, being very intentional is what kind of interview do you want to facilitate? So that initial loyalty that commitment is starting to be built right from the beginning. And this is something to look at is, again, being intentional. The performance standards are there. People have to do the work. But one of the biggest things that I see when working with organizations is how managers in general struggle with how things have evolved. And what I mean by that is nowadays, managers have a lot more people responsibilities than in the past. In the past, you leaned on HR to do certain things, but it's not about that because you're having the most interactions with your team. So you need to be mindful of how am I creating the optimal experience for them to thrive. And so there's certain things. And in fact, Gallup says that when it comes to overall engagement, managers account for 70% of employee engagement. So that shows you what kind of role you and your managers may have in terms of determining how engaged people are. Now remember, engagement is a byproduct of commitment. So when people are highly committed, they're going to engage in the behaviors that lead to the demonstration of engagement. But we need to give them a reason to be engaged. And so, a reason to be committed. And so this is where, again, it kind of goes under this umbrella for looking at, we want people to be loyal. And just remember, and this is something that's been popping up with organizations I've been talking to recently, is that people are not really having as much of a retention challenge as maybe a year or two ago. But just remember, just because people are staying doesn't mean they're doing a great job either. And so, again, commitment and engagement, that applies to everyone, regardless of how long they've been in your organization or on your team. So looking through the prism of how do I create a professionally meaningful experience for my employees? And looking at this latest information on quiet cracking, it's on a continuum of quiet resignation and all these other ones that have come out over the past couple of years. But you're seeing this general theme of employees not feeling satisfied, not feeling fulfilled. Not because they're greedy, I would say. I think because their needs have evolved. Their needs have evolved, and managers in general and organizational leaders have not evolved with it. So I think that's a really good opportunity for you to look at and assess for yourself, like, where do I fall in this? How am I contributing to the performance of my team, to the engagement of folks? How engaged are you, for example? Because we're seeing engagement scores for managers going down. They went from 30 to 27%. So that's going in the wrong direction as well. So if you're not engaged, you're not going to get it from your staff. So you want to make sure that you're presenting with positive energy. You're looking at the ownership and accountability in terms of assessing how you are contributing to a thriving environment. How are you contributing to that? And how are you contributing to your own professional development and growth? And so if that's not being met, then you may want to make a journal entry and say, okay, look, I need to look at this. I need to take a look at, assess this. I think this is an area of opportunity. I don't think I'm leading as well as I could be, and do something about it. Find some books, talk to some other people, really start to expand your approach and different things you're looking at. Because many people are stuck in a traditional leadership approach because they don't know any difference. And that's one of the things, again, we talk about in the Highly Effective Managers program is moving from a traditional approach to a modern one, a modern leadership approach to align with the needs of employees. And in this research from Talent LMS illustrates that. It illustrates how managers and organizations, they need to be focused on learning and development for staff. They need to focus on managers asking for feedback. They need to be recognizing employee work achievements. But these things are common sense. But Gallup talks about weekly recognition. So these are all opportunities for you to look at. So if you want employee loyalty, you need to give them a reason to be loyal. And that's showing that, your commitment and their growth. You telling them that I want you to want to be here long term. And if you have any challenges with that, I want you to come talk to me. And so that's you conveying psychological safety without having to use the word. It's just that you want to show them that, hey, if you're experiencing any kind of challenges or you feel unsatisfied in some ways, then why don't you come talk to me and let's look at an opportunity. Let's sit down together. Let's schedule a Zoom call if you're remote and let's look at this. And so, but we don't want people to leave without really exploring opportunities and getting you involved. But you also need to facilitate that kind of environment to where people want to do that. So definitely some good things to look at in terms of the quiet cracking. I think there's a lot of proactive measures that managers can do. And so, but again, if you want to learn more, why don't you join me for the next Highly Effective Managers program starting July 24th, or reach out to me and let's explore that for your organization. So over 7,000 managers have gone through that and over 100 organizations. So definitely would love the opportunity to work with you and your team. But any thoughts or suggestions for future podcast episodes, send me an email, tim@modernleadershippodcast.com. Have a great day.